Good afternoon. My name is Patricia Coder, and it is my great privilege and pleasure to introduce to you today Sister Margo Ritchie, the congregational leader of the Sisters of St. Joseph in Canada. Margo and I first crossed paths in London, Ontario back in the day when Sister Margo was working in adult education at the Christian Renewal Center. Margo had had a successful career as a high school teacher and was bringing these skills to community ministry. In 1998, Margo was elected to leadership of her congregation and served the next 14 years. Margo lived out of the charism of her chosen vocation, modeling love of God, the creation, and the dear neighbor without exception, as she led her sisters in community through the transitions of selling the mother house, building a new St. Joseph's residence in London, and the amalgamation with 3 other congregations in Canada. Once the sisters' residence was open, she was responsible for finishing the work of integrating the St. Joseph's Hospice into the residence. The skills that were so much talked about at phase 1 of the synod are not new to Margo. She included her congregation members in every part of those monumental decisions and always kept the spirits open to new possibilities in community ministry. Over these years, I had made a commitment to become an associate of the Sisters of St. Joseph, learning much about how working with their ministries alongside the sisters serving the dear neighbor in the community. Sister Margo included us in very many of the decisions that would affect this relationship. I must share with you that one of the gatherings that we had with Margo to discuss the future of possibilities in ministry. Margo always referred to these discussions as conversations, always open to sharing her knowledge and listening to her input. Her closing remarks that day come to my mind each day as I start. Her remarks were, "We are not finished yet." Margo did have a short break from leadership, but is now again serving as congregational leader, attending to issues both in Canada and internationally, always living from within her charism. Indeed, we are not finished yet. Today, we look forward to hearing from Sister Margo and her reflections on the theme of Cosmogenesis and about what it can teach us about living through change. Welcome, Sister Margo.
Thanks a lot, Pat. It's so good. As I was watching everybody come in, I thought, oh my gosh, I know all these people. And I think I feel supported more than intimidated by the presence of all of you here today. So I'm really grateful, actually, for the chance to be together and to think with you together about this topic of cosmogenesis. Now, interestingly, when it was advertised on our Facebook, there was one person who responded, and it was all in caps. And it was, "What is cosmogenesis?" And you could almost sense a certain kind of exasperation at kind of, what is this new language entering in now? But actually, that is the key question. What are we really talking about? Today, I hope to draw heavily on the work of Brian Swimme and explore how this notion of an expanding universe and a 14 billion year history affect our everyday lives. Otherwise, why spend an hour and a half of a Saturday afternoon in front of a computer? So I'll do a little bit of input, maybe 20, 25 minutes. Then we will be divided into random groupings, and I'll give some prompts for you to begin conversation. We'll come back to the large screen, everybody on screen, and just share, not group reports at all, but just anyone wanting to share what is it that is moving in you, stirring in you. And then I'd like to close with just about 10 or 15 minutes on exploring spiritual practices and new images that might come from this exploration. But I have a few personal hopes about this. One is that it might spark some new thinking or deeper thinking among us, I hope it might draw forth a sense of awe that will give energy and meaning. I suppose in truth, a best hope would be that each one of us would walk away with one idea, one insight, one phrase or word that we know we could spend the rest of our lives thinking about and savoring. One idea or insight that actually changes the way we think and feel about our lives. A hope would be that the question, who am I, takes on a meaning beyond the psychological only. So let's get started together. And Gary, thanks a lot for all your help with the tech stuff. I think that the essence of cosmogenesis can be expressed in 3 sentences. The first one is short. When we look up at the night sky, we are looking at that which is looking. Now let that sink in for a moment. Think of suggesting that it is not only the human that has relational consciousness. It suggests a connection, an aliveness. Nothing static here, not a thing. And so it invites a response that is more than, aren't the stars beautiful tonight? Although that's a pretty good start. It invites a relationship. And it reminds me of a quote from the French poet Charles Baudelaire. His work was part of a university course some 50 years ago when I was studying, and I recall it like it was yesterday. He used to go out on, I think they were probably drug-induced long, long walks. But in one of his poems, he said, Hier, j'ai rencontré une fleur qui m'a dit son nom. Yesterday, I met a flower who told me her name. But I want to take this a little further and reflect briefly on beauty. Just going to get my lights on again. Surely the night sky is an expression of beauty and an experience of beauty. And yet, I want to be clear that beauty is not just an escape from the tragic world we also live in. So cosmogenesis is not a way of moving away from the political, the everyday that is happening all around us and through us. The beauty of the night sky really is an example of continuing relationship and deepening relationship with the light that travels many, many years to reach us. The universe and its development or evolution is all about creating ever more complex relationships to make it possible for life in every form to flourish. But I want to give you an example. I wrote this about a week ago, and I was listening to a podcast this morning by Krista Tippett, and it struck me that something she said, one of the interviewees said, fits here. One of the speakers was a teacher who ran a school for girls in Afghanistan. In 2021, when the Taliban took over, the whole school fled en masse as a unit to Rwanda, which was the only country willing to accept them. Now think about that for a moment, and think about the violent history of Rwanda. Perhaps some of you have read some of the writing of Romeo Dallaire, who was an army general during that time and was in Rwanda and watched in horror and helplessness as the ethnic cleansing took place. But here's the thing. The teacher, whose name is Shabana Bazij Rasik, said that Rwanda embraced them. They were not met at the airport by immigration officers. They were met at the airport by trauma counselors. Just think about that. Rwanda knew what was needed. And this is one, I tell this story because this is one of the guiding innate principles of the universe. What is needed for life to flourish? That's the universe question. What is needed for life to flourish? And as I was thinking of it, wouldn't that be an ideal question in all of our political and economic systems? What is needed for life for all to flourish? The stars knew at some level that their death released minerals that were needed to create new forms of life on our planet. And so again, to come back to looking at the night sky, which is looking at the night sky, which actually created the possibility for life that we call human. Now that is relationality at its best. Now the second sentence might be considered a little run-on. I think the English teachers in the crowd would say, oh, please. So here it is by Brian Swimme. The universe began 14 billion years ago with the emergence of elementary particles in the form of primordial plasma, which quickly morphed into atoms of hydrogen, helium, and lithium. 100 million years later, galaxies began to appear. And in one of these, the Milky Way, minerals arranged themselves into living cells that constructed advanced life, including evergreen trees, coral reefs, and the vertebrate nervous system that humans used to discover this entire sequence of the universe's development. So there it is. That's cosmogenesis in one run-on sentence. This one sentence is the retelling of the creation story. And when you think about it, the first three words from the Gospel of St. John, in the beginning, now take on new meaning. What's the beginning? And let's move now to our third thought of Brian Swimme. We are not separate from the universe. The universe and Earth constructed us. We, the human, are derivative. We are the descendants of this evolving creation of new forms of life that began 14 billion years ago. Now just think of that. We are the descendants of 14 billion years ago of life becoming more complex. And he would also say that actually, as we are sitting in this room talking, we are the universe reflecting verbally on itself. So a funny story that Brian Swimme shares is that when he tells people that he is a cosmologist, and I'm not sure exactly what circles you say to somebody, I'm a cosmologist, but they assume he does hairdos and mascara. And everybody laughs, but his response was, you would be surprised at how often this happens. So essentially, cosmogenesis has two strands. One is scientific. And if you do read the book Cosmogenesis by Brian Swimme, those of you who have a scientific bent will have a bit of an easier time with some of the chapters. Scientists investigate the origin and development of the universe. But the second strand in the book, which is saturated with this, is the human story. The strand is the humanities, the arts, and philosophy. The role of the humanities is to focus on the role of the human in the universe. And here is a thought to consider again. When we are here on this Zoom call on a Saturday afternoon on May 25th, it is really, we are really the universe reflecting on itself. I don't even pretend to really get that. but it feels like it's just on the edge of my understanding. The challenge with ideas like cosmogenesis is that they can become esoteric and intellectual only conversations. But let's hear what the real point is, as Brian Swimme names what he sees as his vocation in what he is doing. He says, my own story is offered with the hope that it might become a small part of an emerging planet-wide conversation on how to live together in this 14 billion year enterprise. You know, and honestly, each one of us could say that. My own story is offered with the hope that it might become a small part, because that's all each of us has, small and real, of an emerging planet-wide conversation on how to live together in this 14 billion year enterprise. And honestly, with the news we're watching today, don't we have a lot to learn about how to live together on the planet? There is a radical inversion of our usual understanding. Mostly, we tend to think that the human unfolding, think of the human unfolding within time. We think that the human is the central actor of everything. But let this idea sink in. It blows my mind that we live in something like a developing being with its own sense of creative unfolding. So we have our creative unfolding as individuals. We have our creative unfolding as collectives, you know, groups of people, but we exist within a larger unfolding of the universe itself. So what happens when we think of the universe also evolving, even as the human evolves? And feminist theologians like Elizabeth Johnson, in writing from her own perspective, concurs and puts it this way. Even as a species, we are not separate and isolated, but in all our uniqueness, we belong from the cells of our bodies to the finest creations of our minds, to the intricate, constantly changing cosmos. It really is quite a shift in self-understanding. It seems true that for the human being, we spend quite a bit of energy asking ourselves as part of the larger community, and we say, who are we? Who am I to express? How am I to express who I am? What am I called to do? But here's another interesting dialogue between Thomas Berry and Brian Swimme. So Brian Swimme was asking about his own calling to become a cosmic storyteller. He is really asking the question of what his specific purpose is. Why am I here? And he says, if I hope to become a cosmic storyteller, what is my next step? The answer does not suggest that the first next step is taking in more information or studying technique. On the contrary, the answer indicates that one's identity is all about shedding what we had always thought, a form of letting go of too small an identity. It requires a metanoia, a fundamental shift in perspective, a turning toward a new understanding and experience, and a willingness to be attracted to a new way of seeing. And I really want to emphasize that piece, a willingness to be attracted and getting in touch with our own experience of when we know we're being attracted to something. And so here is what Thomas Berry said to Brian Swimme. Come to understand that you are not a scientist. You are not an American. You are not male. You are not even primarily human. First and foremost, you are a cosmological being, which means you are the universe in the mode of a human. You are a universe in the expression, the way of being as a human. Inventions like the Hubble telescope, and we've all watched those with kind of amazement that we see so much, and the James Webb telescope are giving us visuals of the universe, of the multiple galaxies beyond our imaginings. And these images are shifting our own inner landscape and enabling us to see what people see, like people like Berry and Swimme called deep time. By helping us experience ourselves as the universe, that is what the story of Cosmogenesis offers us. And this need for deeper understanding of ourselves has been noted by some of the finest minds in the history of philosophy. So if we can take ourselves back to 500 years before the Common Era, BCE, we tend to say BC, so 500 to 300 years BC, we note the rising of all our most of our great religious traditions, not all. We could say that the universe was evolving in the human creation of myth and symbol and stories to explain and guide our lives. And just the next time you're in having coffee or a glass of wine with someone, this was called an axial age because of its cluster of thought that emerged in various parts of the world at the same time. And the way I think about this, you know, the cluster of thought happening all over, the same kind of clusters of thought all over the world at that time, I think of it like the forsythia bush that all of a sudden just seems to bloom all at once. And so Karl Jasper uses the phrase axial age to refer to the time 2,500 years ago when spectacular personalities came forth and established spiritual forms of major civilizations. So names like Confucius, the Hebrew prophets, Lao Tzu, Pythagoras, Buddha, all in the same century. Something new was happening, and it started to evolve in many different places. And so what about today? Who are the names on this leading edge of something new? And in our day, we are being invited into a new moment, a new vision of the cosmos, of our sense of time, of other ways to image this mystery to whom we have given many names, one of them being God. New names that will be cited centuries from now as initiators of this evolutionary leap are Thomas Berry, Brian Swimme, Joanna Macy, Teilhard de Chardin, Ken Wilber, Mary Evelyn Tucker, John Grimm, Heather Eaton, Mary Mark Howard, Maureen Wilde. I might add Gertie Jocks, and so many others from other parts of the planet. As we begin to come to a close of what I want to say, I'm so mindful of what is actually on our minds in our day-to-day lives. As I was finishing this talk last weekend, the news came on that the International Crimes Court had named 2 Israeli leaders and 3 Hamas leaders as being actors in crimes against humanity. They are seeking arrest warrants whose charges include murder, starvation, rape, and sexual assault. The Iranian president died in the fog in a helicopter crash. Thousands of students are continuing to protest the war on university campuses. 2 friends are probably in their final stages of their cancer journeys. Over the course of 30 minutes, looking out my window, 2 separate people carrying their home in shopping carts walk by on their way to hunt for a meal on a holiday Monday. Another friend is celebrating the birth of her first great-grandchild. And that's all within a course of a couple of hours. And you have all your own experience that you each take in and bear each day. And along with all that is happening, multiple people are banding together to be critical yeast on the planet as they try to change the story on homelessness, climate crisis, poverty, and on belonging. Some of us are trying to be good parents. Others are entering politics with a moral compass. Some create art and beauty. Some just keep getting up in the morning, sometimes with anguish and pain and some bits of hope, refusing to turn away from both the terror and the beauty in their own lives and in the world. And of course, you could name all that each of us carry as we live in this world. And so coming to close to the end of this part, for peace, again, this is from Brian Swimme, for peace to reign on earth, humans must evolve into new beings who have learned first to see the whole. What does that even look like, to see the whole first? I was kind of grappling with that as I was putting this together, and I was sharing that with a friend and said to her that I didn't really understand what is meant by taking in the whole first. And so she gave me an image which makes some sense, but I'll still keep reflecting on it. She thought for a moment, she said, well, what about this? When a parent first looks at their newborn, and of course, if they have enough privilege to have some security about that, when a parent first looks at their newborn, they see everything they hoped for in the life of this child. They see the whole of the child's life and hope for resilience, health, happiness, good relationships. They take decades of her life in with one gulp in that first seeing. And then they think about diapers and daycare and radical change in their own lives, but they see the whole first. So these are a few thoughts that I share with you, but it's time for your voice now with each other. And so Keith is going to break us into small groups. I'm aware that there's, and Keith and I talked about, the London boardroom has a number of people, and so they'll stay as their own individual group. And so we'll have about half an hour in our groups. And yeah, let's say 25 minutes in our groups. And here are some possibilities for starting. What do I most want to talk about from what I just heard? And why is that important to me? Okay, so just from what I've heard so far, what is it that kind of captured my attention, attracted me, and why is that important for me?
And everyone's back.
Great. Well, I think what we want to do right now is enter into some conversation together, just not a group reporting, but just something that might have come up in your group or for you that you would like the whole group to hear. Who'd like to get us started? Okay, Kathleen.
One of my conundrums of many about cosmogenesis is our traditional definition of incarnation, Father, Son, in context of 14 billion years of history. And I know Ilia Delio and Elizabeth Johnson both refer to that conundrum, but I'm curious, Margo, what your take on that is. That Trinitarian, what a Trinitarian Christian approach.
Yeah, well, let me see. It's actually Trinity Sunday tomorrow too, isn't it? Timely question. Let me start with that, but again, I invite other people to jump in because I know some people on the call are very, very well thought out in these things. I think the incarnation, one piece, the incarnation happened in time. It happened in a particular culture. It could all probably only be expressed in a particular cultural way and a particular gender way at that time. And so that incarnation piece in history of Jesus. But I think, and I'll say this a little later on in what I'm going to share, that somehow from a cosmological point of view, Jesus was what the universe always intended 14 million years ago. That somehow Jesus was one who was aligned completely with that intention of the universe. So I'm going to start there. And if anybody else wants to add a piece to that, or maybe you have more to say, Kathleen.
Well, I still have problems, even in progressive social justice, cosmologically literate settings, of hearing God referred to as Father and He, no matter what. And there doesn't seem to have been much movement in that regard, which makes me wonder how deep the thinking is about cosmogenesis.
I think one of the things I know that in feminist circles, certainly there has been a lot of attention to language and the images behind the language. But certainly in church circles, that has not happened, at least the Catholic tradition. I don't know, I think the other traditions have done some more work on that. Anything else anyone wants to share?
Just a reminder to use the reactions. Oh, we've got Gertie.
There's Gertie. Hi, Gertie.
So Gertie,
Hi,
if you can,
Margo.
there you go.
Always nice to see you. Well,
Nice.
this might be on the same topic, but it might not be. I was just following Matthew Fox, who's big into the new story and cosmogenesis, and it's he's referred to a lot in Brian's book. Well, lately he has a daily reflection every day, and the last couple of days he's been focusing on the Pope's message saying about people getting stuck in dogma and challenging that. And he said, really, dogma means to play, that nothing should be locked in a box, that we play with it. There are some boundaries to our play. But, if we think about Trinity and incarnation, what would it be in our imagination if we just played with that, with one another? Not only in our own thoughts, but have some thoughts around what could that have possibly have meant, or what could it mean, and not to get blocked into or locked into the dogmatic understanding. So anyhow, it's been very interesting, his writings on that.
Thanks, Gertie. So Paula.
I'll need you to unmute your microphone, Paula.
I resonated with what the quote you made, Margo, in saying that Jesus was aligned with the intention of the universe. yeah, and I think that was his gift to us, and that the church has passed on with some success over the years. We've had so many movements within the church of people who were like totally inspired and dedicated with that vision of the human family, and like the Sisters of St. Joseph, for instance, and so many religious communities who gave wonderful gifts that built communities wherever. I'm worried now that even the name of Jesus or the talk of Jesus is subject to ridicule, in part because of, I guess, the right-wing evangelical embrace of the Republican Party in the States, and so many absolutely Christian positions. And we really need the essential message of Jesus right now, and his vision of all of us included, and all of us around the table, and sharing the goods of the earth, sharing the food of the earth. So it's really I guess a challenge for the church today to manifest that in a way that can be accepted by young people, by our own young people in the church. And concerns me a little bit that Pope Francis, that I love and gives me hope. He's come out now saying that no, probably not women deacons. And maybe he does say it's because we don't need any more of the clericalism. So let's see what else he comes up with to fully include women and give them, a bigger voice needed.
Thanks, Paula. Joy.
In our group, I asked the question, and we had an interesting conversation. Right now, it seems like the universe is going in the opposite direction of cosmogenesis. There seems to be so much division, so much refusal to see that we are all 99.9% same DNA, etc. And there's we see billions of dollars being wasted on wars. We see the destruction of the planet. We see, like, it seems to me there are many signs that we're not taking the cosmogenesis story seriously. In fact, we're pushing against it. And I wondered, sometimes I ask myself that question: is maybe God is pushing us to the point of no return? I mean, sometimes when you have to hit rock bottom before you see the truth, I'm wondering if we're going through that phase right now. I wondered if you thought, if you had shared any of those feelings.
My hunch is that if everyone on the screen was to answer that question, it would be, yes, it does seem to be going in the opposite direction, toward divisiveness, toward decreation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting what you're saying, Joy, is the more we're being pushed against the wall, in a sense, to use that, that perhaps we have the capacity to wake up even more and something else.
Yeah.
Gary, by the way, I don't assume these are answers I'm giving. They're just thoughts, and realizing all of you are having your own thoughts too at the same time. So Gary.
What I shared is that the decreation that you mentioned, Sister Margo, that we see all the destructiveness, all the human-induced climate change, because we are destroying our planet, is not being helped by the mainstream of our church, in my experience, because we continue to be locked into the perspective of the individual, atomized individual in a relationship with God, in a relationship with the divine, and because of that, what we are not encouraging, the vision that we're not encouraging is precisely the vision that Cosmogenesis is pointing us towards, which is that we are planetary beings, and we have to think not of me, but of the planet, of the universe, of the human beings in the universe, of all the life, the interrelated life in the universe. And that perspective is not the perspective that I hear in church when I go to church on every Sunday, and it's not the mainstream perspective. So on the margins, you have exciting things happening in terms of people who have embraced this broader vision that we are planetary beings, right? And we have to think at that kind of level. In a way, I think that our mainstream church is one of the obstacles to what we need to see in terms of this broader vision of the creator God, of the creative love energy in the universe.
You remind me, Gary, of an image from Jean Paul Lederach, who is a great peace activist. And if there's any group in the world that could be discouraged right now, it are peace activists. But he uses the image of critical yeast, which is a very biblical image, actually. He puts it with that critical yeast, that there are small groupings of people in every part of the world, which we do not hear enough about, being that critical yeast toward that, not only the vision of planetary people, but also the very practical acting our way into that new way of being. Yeah. Nikki, did you have your hand up at one point?
I did. I don't know what happened to it.
I agree, comment on rather than hand raised, but I caught it, so go ahead.
I just found this hour has been just marvelous, and we all in our group of 5 really appreciate the language you chose today. I just wrote down so many words of it, in grade 6 grammar, words of action, and they're just so important for us. And we live in such an untidy world today, but there are so many opportunities to keep us alive and going and excited about so many things. I mean, the very presence of Francis is a source of excitement for me, and all that he's trying so hard to do. And those of us who are certainly much older and over 80 and remember Vatican II with great love and affection, we see and we feel so much of that excitement again, and so much hope. And your language today, and so many words were just have really came alive for me. So thanks so much, Margo.
Okay. Anybody else?
I'd just like to reiterate a comment that Hélène Thibert made, saying it's important to focus on the positive at this time and not feed the darkness. So thank you for that.
Right, and I'm going to try to pronounce the name and get it correct. Ezanata?
It isn't Azenta. That's a guy on screen. I'm on his link. It's Barbara Billy. Hi, Margo.
Oh, hi. I didn't recognize you.
Anyway, this conversation has been critical yeast for me, and I wonder if anyone has any ideas about how we can continue the conversation. Are there places that are having these conversations like this one?
Yes. I would say join CLC.
Oh, okay. However,
No, I'm serious. We've had many of these conversations, many very interesting webinars. So just check out our website.
Okay. Can you give that to me again, please?
Concerned Lay Catholics.
.ca. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, in addition to the webinars, we've had lots of smaller group discussions around synodality and indigenous concerns and things like that. So there's been a lot of good discussion.
Thank you.
Nice to see you, Barb.
You too, and it's Azenta.
Kathleen.
He's here somewhere.
Just to add sources, Margo would be familiar with this. I'm a C&D associate in Ottawa, and there's a new program at University of St. Paul on leadership, ecology, and equity, and they already have some really good free videos. The program only starts in the fall, but if you go to usestpaul.ca and you find the YouTube channel, you'll find lots of good free videos. There was one recently by Linda
Gregg,
Gregg on
the soil.
the soil, which was very good. And Heather Eaton has a really good one, a great one there too about the new school. So it's a good source. And if you find sort of the admin person on that site and ask to be added to the list, you'll get notices of all the free webinars that are.
Can you say the name again, please?
It's the school. If you go into usestpaul.ca.
Okay.
And you find School of Leadership, Ecology, and Equity, and and if you go into you will find links to what's going on there. I'm not sure if they have the YouTube link there, but if you look at that same name of the school under YouTube, you'll find all their free videos.
Thank you.
Gertie, have you got some more resources?
Yes, programs in Earth literacies that I'm part of facilitating. I'll put the website, the link to the website in the chat. And we offer online programs. And in the fall, we've got Dermot O'Murku coming to do a program on ecological spirituality. And we have a lot of past programs that are really good that people could watch, could sign up for and watch, and even share together in groups. So be sure to check out our website.
That's great.
Thanks, Margo.
I'm so glad I asked.
Yeah.
Okay, Susan. Oh, I think you've got to take yourself off mute.
This is me being really silly, and now she's disappeared. I think it was Barbara something more so or something like that. Her background was the stars, and it just incited my imagination that there she was sitting there. Hold on.
Is it Heather Roussel?
Rosemary Brosseau.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Rosemary. There she is sitting amongst
All the
the
stars.
entire cosmos. And is that not what we've been talking about exactly today? That we are just one little atom in a whole creation, a body of creation, and we're just little parts of it. So thank you, Rosemary.
I didn't do
Lesson
it.
right there.
Accident.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
I'm just aware of your time also. Are we ready to move on just to a few closing comments? Okay, that's great. Thanks. So I want to do just a little bit on some practical implications, and particularly how we celebrate some feasts begin to shift. For example, Pentecost, which we just celebrated, changes shape when we think of the original fire of some 14 billion years ago. The Christian feast and celebration of the divine, God, sharing divine fire with the human is included and transcended in the image of the divine embedded in all matter from the beginning, shining forth in all matter. And the human is only a part of this embedded in matter energy, which Teilhard would call the fire of love. Scientists estimate that with each passing second, another star has exploded and is dispersing its treasures. This extravagant gift-giving is the spirituality of the universe. And this is a piece that always strikes me as I think about it. What is revealed from the beginning of the universe is that the patterns of self-emptying and flourishing, of nothing lasts forever and everything lasts in cosmological time, of dying and rising, are the very nature of the universe. In Christian tradition, Jesus, as seen without the overlays of culture, lived a life aligned with the intention of God, and we would now want to add with the intention of the universe. The universe intended in the original fire this very particular manifestation of love that we call Jesus. And I might add, if we could ever take this in, but we have to let go of a lot of stuff first. The universe intended each of us in the original fire as manifestations of this gift giving and generosity. Second implication is that of vocation. The word has sometimes been used in such small ways. The categories have been well circumscribed. There is vocation in Catholic circles. There was vocation to priesthood or religious life, married life, single life. All of this framing is encased in patriarchal and hierarchical rigid patterns and have almost nothing to do with vocation from a cosmological perspective. The real question is, how is this original fire of creativity, diversity, and communion drawing me to offer my gifts? Vocation for each of us is about being attracted to something. And again, we could take a lifetime, how do we sense when we're attracted to something? How do we pay attention to that within ourselves when there's so many other competing feelings and voices? Vocation for each of us is about being attracted, not because what attracts us is easy or even clear. Rather, we have some sense that this is what I am to offer with others. A foundational question is, what is love asking of me? And more in a collective way, we ask, what is love asking of us? Third point, there's only 4, so traditional things take on new meaning. Again, what we have always thought is included and transcended in a cosmological approach. Let's consider feasts in the Christian tradition. How might we look at Corpus Christi and the words of consecration, "This is my body"? From a cosmogenesis perspective, the whole universe is the body of the divine. We live in a universe full of contradictions and human blindness. At the same time, we also live in a universe saturated by and with the divine. And in the month of May, why not present images of the cosmic Mary? And there is a depiction where Mary has the universe within her, or just around her heart area, her chest area. She, in this depiction, is not in the universe is in her. Or more accurately, we might say that she is the universe in more conscious mode. And let us think of what we mean by conversion and the human capacity for harm. We stop thinking so much about I was impatient or I was whatever, although those things may be true too. We move into a more whole thought process, which is really concrete and specific. And again, this is Thomas Berry. To devastate a beauty that required billions of years to emerge is an act of biocide. And Thomas Aquinas, now we're talking a few centuries ago, the more accurate term for devastating abuse that took billions of years is deicide. To eliminate a species is to eliminate divine presence. Take that in. To eliminate a species is to eliminate an aspect of divine presence. And so lastly, I just want to think about time, which is such a subjective thing. You know, being caught in traffic and heading to an appointment makes this moment in your life seem like forever. 2 minutes seems like an hour. You can notice your heart rate increasing. You begin to look at what's holding the traffic up. If only that blue pickup would move to the other lane. Now picture that same moment as you head home from a satisfying meeting at the end of the day. At the red light, you recall the meeting and the potential turning points in the meeting. Time seems like nothing. It happens 10 times a day in our own experience. But now let's expand that frame. And I'm going to use our example of Sisters of St. Joseph. You apply your own examples. In our own history of Sisters of St. Joseph, we say that we came to Canada around 1851 from the United States. But then we also say that we were born as a congregation in France in 1650. What does it mean now for us to say that actually we were imagined some 14 billion years ago at that original flaring forth? That actually what we experience now, even as we decline, is the original fire from 14 billion years ago. Talk about putting things in perspective. Try that out on your own life and see if it adds a sense of alignment with that 14 billion years ago. Does it give more energy to know that we are not just making it on our own, but rather that we are still being drawn by that 14 billion year old gift of fire, that gift of capacity for communion and differentiation and creativity. It adds steadiness to our precarious days. It adds responsibility to our desire to make the world a more hospitable place for us all. And finally, and Gary, I don't know if you can find these, if it's too awkward, not to worry. Exactly. Thank you so much. So 2 quotes. First one from Rumi. He seems to have intuited a central feature of cosmogenesis, attraction and being pulled forward. Let yourself be silently drawn by the stronger pull of what you really love. It will not lead you astray. You know, just as I look at that now, that stronger pull reminds me of the conversation we just had a few minutes ago. There are all kinds of pulls in our life toward revenge, toward division, toward competition, toward whatever. But this is saying, let yourself be drawn by the stronger pull because it came from so long ago. And I want to now, and also instead of silently be drawn, I might add raucously be drawn. And finally, let's give the final word to Teilhard. Someday, after mastering the winds, the waves, the tides, and gravity, we will have honors for God, the energies of love. And then for a second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire. So just thank you so much for today and just for the opportunity to be with you. I've really enjoyed putting together some ideas and hearing your own reflections. So thanks so much.
So we'll turn it over to Joy. And Joy, you need to, yeah.
Thank you. Sister Margo, thank you for a wonderful presentation. You started off by saying a best hope would be that each one of us walk away with one idea, insight, or phrase that we know we could spend a lifetime exploring and savoring. That hope has certainly been fulfilled in your most excellent presentation today. I'm sure many of us were relieved when you reflected on the question, what is my next step? To hear that the answer does not suggest that the first next step is taking in more information or studying technique. But first of all, it is about shedding what we had always thought, a form of letting go of a too small identity. There were many thoughts that resonated with me, and I'm sure with all of you, and challenged me too. Does it give more energy to know that we are not just making it on our own, but rather that we are still being drawn by a 14 billion year old gift of fire, the gift of the capacity for love? It adds responsibility to our desire to make the world a more hospitable place for all of us. You left us with some key questions to consider and to take away. How is this original fire of creativity, diversity, and communion drawing me to offer my gifts? What is love asking of me? What is needed for life to flourish? Thank you sincerely for this inspirational presentation on cosmogenesis, which calls us to recognize our interconnectedness with each other and with the cosmos. Through the ages, many mystics from all faith traditions have pursued oneness with God as their life's goal. And now you have shown us how that oneness also includes and requires unity with the universe. This new insight must and hopefully will inspire us to work even harder to eliminate hatred, war, division, and ecocide. Thank you for opening our eyes, Margo. We're so happy to have had the pleasure of your company this afternoon. Thank you.
Well, I echo some final words. I echo Joy's words of thanks, and I'm very grateful for the fresh insights that I expect many of us have developed from today's session with Sister Margo. One key takeaway for reflection for me is how to live as a cosmological being in the mode of a human. The recording of today's presentation will be made available on our YouTube channel and website in a few weeks. If you registered for today, you will receive an email with the recording link. To receive news of our other program offerings, please sign up at our website using the Contact Us button. It's at concernedlaycatholics.ca/add-your-voice. concernedlaycatholics.ca, add your voice. This is the last seminar in our 2023-2024 series. We hope that you will join us in September as we kick off the 2024-2025 season with a webinar looking at Indigenous wisdom and caring for creation, presented in partnership with the Laudato Si movement in Canada. Watch our website for details later in the summer. If you would like to help CLC continue to offer programs to educate, engage, and empower the laity, and if it is within your means, please consider making a financial contribution to CLC through our website, concernedlaycatholics.ca. We are a registered charity, and you will receive a charitable receipt for income tax purposes. Any financial assistance you're able to provide aids with the costs of providing quality programs and keeps them accessible to all. CLC is a volunteer-run organization, but we still have out-of-pocket costs. A big thank you to everyone who already supports CLC with your presence, your prayers, your talents, and your treasure. Our hope is for Catholics everywhere to come together, to learn together, to pray together, and to act together for healing, reconciliation, and transformation in our church and in our world. We welcome, of course, people of other faith traditions who are allies in working for the transformation of our world, inspired by peace, justice, the interrelatedness of all life, and the integrity of creation. As you leave here today, we hope you are enriched in your understanding of what it means to be churched, confirmed in your faith, and inspired to do whatever is given to you to do, whatever is your vocation, contributing to build the reign of God in our place and time. God bless everyone. Thank you again for coming. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And thank you above all, Sister Margo, for a wonderful presentation that has inspired us all. Thank you.